Yeah, I mean, I think that Charlamagne definitely helped Andrew get where he's going, and the reason why we, as like hip hop fans, are even having a conversation about him is in large part because us seeing Andrew Schulz contextualized against Charlamagne for all those years allows us to view him as somebody that we're interested in, even without him really being like invested in hip hop, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, Andrew Schulz. Yeah, he's way bigger than Charlamagne. I mean, his podcast does way crazier numbers than The Breakfast Club. I know, like, Charlamagne kind of holds on to this idea that The Breakfast Club is this huge thing, and there were even viral clips of him talking about how The Breakfast Club is bigger than Joe Rogan at a certain point, which was like, whoa, bro, you got to pull your head out of the sand because, like, Joe Rogan's shit's like 50 times bigger than Breakfast Club. Yeah. But I would say Flagrant is way bigger than The Breakfast Club, too. Charlamagne might not see it because he's, like, kind of got his head dug down into hip-hop, but Flagrant is fucking gigantic.
Gigantic. Similar to the situation that Andrew Schulz may be in. I mean, it's a known fact that when Andrew Schulz first started on this YouTube or podcast game, right, he was on a podcast called Brilliant Idiots with Charlamagne. And through that, he was able to leverage connections, leverage practice, right? The more you do something, you may get better at it. So Andrew Schulz got better at his craft of being on camera, and eventually it built up to where he is now, which is Flagrant. And it's becoming to the point that it's kind of like the Joe Rogan effect. A lot of people watch Joe Rogan not necessarily because he is so funny, but because they've seen him on the podcast. Because they are fans of the podcast, they just want to see him in person in the stand-up show. Same thing with Andrew Schulz. People are, I bet you, are listening or they're watching the Andrew Schulz comedy shows in person because they're fans of the podcast first. Then they attend the show just to see him in person. So it's kind of like that effect. But remember when I said previously that Andrew Schulz really got on camera, right? The YouTube camera when he was on the Brilliant Idiots podcast with Charlamagne, right? At that time, Charlamagne was a lot bigger, right? He was a host on The Breakfast Club. But here's the thing. Once Andrew Schulz became a lot bigger, way bigger than Charlamagne, right? With the Flagrant podcast, is like the old song, right? When your idols become rivals, right? When you first came up, that person may have been not at the same level. A couple of years later, things change. So I understand how Andrew Schulz is feeling, right? He wants to feel respected. People who disrespected Andrew Schulz, whether directly or indirectly, like, oh, they're not treating me like a friend type of interview. They're just treating me like a business interview. Andrew Schulz kind of feeling a little gigantic, saying, how dare you treat me like this? People who may reject Andrew Schulz offers. Now, how dare you treat me like this? Where maybe a couple of years ago when Andrew Schulz wasn't as big, he might have taken the beatings. Pause. He might have been able to take a few licks because he understood he wasn't as big. But now that he's big now, it's not just Andrew Schulz. It's Andrew Schulz, the superstar.